Okay, we're going to begin to address some of the problems that we have been covering, and this is with hour 8 of our course, Everybody Knows. Here's our thesis statement once again, and I've gone over this in the presentation. I don't need to do it again. Who's going to parent the parents? We don't know. More often than not, I believe we are. They lack discipline skills, they're so angry, and they take out their rage on their own kids. And this has been going on for generations. Now, what we have to begin to understand right up front is what the symptoms of a disaffected person are. In other words, what we see with our eyes. And someone could come into you, and they could be, very self-critical. They could have wishful comparison with others. They may not even trust you. And they may attempt to hide unchangeable features. And they certainly have attitudes of superiority. What I want us to do is hold that thought on unchangeable features. Certainly they have wrong priorities. Certainly they could be extravagant. But we want to hold the thought on unchangeable features. The surface causes are what we see. These are the attitudes. You're going to see anger, but anger will express itself in many ways. If parents are fearful, if they feel guilty, if they feel insecure, they could act out. And I've often said this, when you have a person who has anger, all they're looking for, and I call it referred anger, referred bitterness. What I'm suggesting here is they're bitter at a lot of stuff. We just gave them a reason to act out because of a problem that they have with us or with the school or how we treated their kid. So the bottom line here is we have to be ready to deal with both a clinical problem, which is when someone becomes angry and they turn it on themselves, then they become depressed. And then we have to be ready to deal with the conduct problem. When somebody becomes angry and they act out. Sometimes the person won't always act out when they're angry or when they're bitter. They may have all of this stored up. And what we want to avoid is having that cup run over. Because if that cup runs over, they could act out and take out a lot of that rage on a lot of people, and that's things that we want to avoid. The root problem, though, is bitterness. Bitterness is the idea that there are things that are out of our control. There are situations that are out of our control. And when I spoke about the unchangeable features, they are out of our control. Anger is fleeting. It goes by quick. Bitterness is long-standing. It's a youth conflict that became an adult conflict. And someone has affected you. Someone has impacted you when you were young. And you've carried it with you into adulthood. And you could be angry at your parents. You could be angry at teachers. You could be angry at a lot of people or a lot of situations. This could be a playmate who bullied you when you were younger. You've never resolved the conflict, and it's something that is now out of your control. It occurs when we have people who reject the unchangeable features, when they've been wounded emotionally by a parent or a significant other. Emotional wounds never go away. You may get them to heal up, but the scar remains. They also have trouble handling confrontations. They're so angry, a confrontation is an argument. Well, a confrontation is okay as long as you have a productive conflict associated with it. You don't have a productive conflict, where you leave enough space there for a disagreement, it's going to be an argument. And most times, kids have confrontations with their parents, and they are nothing more than an argument. They don't leave space for a disagreement. The issue gets left unresolved, and it becomes an adult conflict moving forward where people don't talk to each other. That's bitterness. It's out of your control, and it's something that happened when you were younger, that where the wound is still there. Here are your unchangeable features. And there they are. Physical characteristics, parents, siblings. You can't change any of these. Nationality, your IQ, your time in history, your gender, and we're not going to get into a discussion about whether or not you can change gender. You're born a certain way. There's a choice that people make to change. Birth order, and problems with aging and death. Now, let's look at this. There is a condition which was called PTSD and still exists. It was part of the problem that we had with that folks had when they came home from the service. Used to be called being shell-shocked, then it was battle fatigue, and so on. And it was a very difficult thing to manage. And our guys are coming home from the service today with PTSD. But there is something more to this now, and there is something that's called complex post-traumatic stress disorder, also known as developmental trauma disorder. And this is a proposed diagnosis for a set of symptoms resulting from prolonged stress of a social or interpersonal nature, especially in the context of interpersonal dependence. Now, here are some of the conditions, situations or conditions that lead to the diagnosis of CPTSD. And the list is probably longer than this, but let's just take a look at the top few. Childhood sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, domestic sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse. Sometimes kids have become parentified, and they have to take care of family members. Then you move into all of the other stuff that deals with, war, concentration camps, torture, kidnapping. But let's look at it in terms of just down to taking care of a chronically ill family member. When young children become parentified, they never have a chance to be a child and do certain things that children do, running, playing, and so on. They're left holding the bag and taking care of a mother or a father. There could be alcoholism, there could be drug addiction, there could be a lot of different things that go on. That type of thing, that type of problem that kid has never gives him the opportunity to grow up. He became too responsible at too young of an age. Now he wants to continue to be, when he has the ability to do things that he wants to do, he's always involved with kid stuff. Or she is. And before you know it, they handle things the way kids handle them. They argue, they fight. They don't know how to handle confrontations, and so on. That's just one thing that can happen. Of course, all the others are horrible, in terms of the abuse that someone has to go through. And parents, many parents that we deal with could come into school with this condition. They are raised in these situations, and they become angry because of it. We have to recognize that many of the life issues that parents face may be the result of trauma rather than deficiencies within themselves. See, we all think that they choose to do it. And I am a believer, that people do choose to do certain things, but also that people, can have a condition. There can be things that have snuck into the private logic of their heads, and they believe that that's the way to handle it. And it's not always them. It may not be a result of the traumatic memory. So we have to learn to recognize their triggers. And I don't mean be afraid of the trigger. I mean we have to know what can set them off. And we have to educate them about the problem that they may have. And we have to educate ourselves. This is a condition that I believe that people have. And it's something, as when parents come to school, they are merely adults in a child's body. They've matured physically, but not emotionally. So this is the reason why we're having such difficulty today, because of the intergenerational tendencies that we have faced over the years with parents not talking to their parents, and now the kids aren't talking to their parents. You got high school kids have run away. They're living at somebody else's house. All of these things absolutely lend itself to the fact that parents need parenting. Help them learn to express themselves. There's nothing, you see, parents come in, they don't know how to express themselves because they want their way. They know if they go home that they're going to end up in an argument with their kid, that they're going to lose, but they could win an argument in school. So what do? They come in and they fight with the school, but we have to give them the opportunity to express themselves correctly, and that needs to be taught. That's a learned behavior. And we have to give them the idea that we can deal with it together. Life is good. We got to keep them positive. Keep them looking at the side of the problem where there's a light at the end of the tunnel, rather than thinking that life is hopeless. Now, there you have it. Keep them positive. Help them learn how to express themselves. We have to become educated about the problem, which is CPTSD. Educate parents about the problem, so they can have what I would call a psychoeducational approach to it, meaning they're beginning to understand why they're the way they are. Help them, and we have to learn to recognize what affects them. Doesn't mean we back down. It means we learn a better response when we hit one of those triggers that sets them off, and it may be something that happens with their kids. It could be something that happens, they may be going through a divorce, they may have a problem with a death in the family. We don't know, but we have to be able to recognize the triggers. And it isn't always them. It isn't always. It is them sometimes, but it's not them all the time. And I apologize for the lightness of this slide. Recognize that some of the issues that parents face may be the result of trauma. That could be the result of anybody's problem. Or that could be the problem that people have, okay? And they're not even parents who have kids in our school. You could run across these people at work. Understand that they're raised in these situations, and sometimes there is no way out. There is no way out when they're younger. And finally, when they get out, the trauma has been too great, and they may have been exposed to any number of these situations that we have here. That's CPTSD. Help them deal with unchangeable features, recognize bitterness, find out what went on in their life so that you can help them move beyond it. Understand that the root problem is bitterness. Bitterness is when you've got a problem, something happened that you've lost control. You don't have any control over it. And that could be the unchangeable features. Get a handle on some of the attitudes, get a handle on some of the surface problems, and understand that dealing with parents, we have to be the parent, but we have to understand what we're dealing with. And the minute we get a handle on what parents are dealing with, and we can see it from their perspective, okay, a person, a good teacher, a good mother, a good father, a good spouse, can see life from the other person's perspective. That's what we have to do. And help them deal with this issue. Help them become better parents, because if they become better parents, their kids will be healthier, and as we move along into school, as they move along and get into school, what will happen is they'll be stronger students, stronger people, okay, and they'll certainly live happier lives.